The Zorik's Dominion flagship, Vaelthar's pride, cut through the cold void like a blade through silk. Its hull shimmered with the deep violet of imperial arrogance, an unmistakable signal to every world in its path, submission or erasure. Inside its command deck, Commander Varix leaned lazily against the armrest of his throne-like chair, one taloned hand draped over a goblet of silvered nectar. His eyes, slit-pupilled, cold, drifted across the tactical display with an air of practiced boredom. Another human colony. Another routine strike. Standard orbital cleansing, Varix said, voice carrying the easy amusement of a man who had never known fear. Burn the reactors first. Watch them scatter. They always scatter. The bridge crew moved with mechanical obedience. They had done this dozens of times in the last year alone. The humans were simple, fragile things, clinging to scattered moons and terraformed rocks, building colonies that toppled like children's towers at the first shove. Varix remembered the first time he'd faced them. He had expected ferocity. Instead, he had found surrender and silence, cities offering terms before the first shot was fired. He had come to enjoy the efficiency of it all. The order was executed without ceremony. A lance of violet energy fell from the warship's belly, punching through the colony's reactor core like a spear through wet paper. A sun-bright flash followed, swallowing the human settlement in silence. No screams carried through the void. Only the fire. But before the reactor went, before the shields collapsed, a single transmission escaped the doomed world. A simple, calm human voice. Message received. Forwarding coordinates. Stand by. Varix frowned. It was not the words themselves that unsettled him, but the tone. No panic. No fury. Not even fear. Just acknowledgement. He had the transmission replayed twice, 3 times. Forwarding coordinates to whom? For what? He shrugged it off. Probably nothing. Humans had always muttered strange defiance before extinction. By the time the second colony fell 2 days later, the same message had been received. Identical words. Identical tone. Almost as if rehearsed. His adjutant brought it to his attention with a nervous tremor in her voice, but Varix waved her away. Coincidence. It had to be. The Dominion Council certainly agreed when he reported in. The Chamber of Lords, vast and dripping with the gold of 1,000 conquered worlds, erupted in mocking laughter. Humans? One lord chortled, the rings stacked along his ears clattering as he shook with mirth. You mean the mudrats who begged us for trade permits 20 cycles ago? Perhaps they've finally learned courage, another sneered. A shame it came so late. Only one voice dissented. Admiral Koroth, the eldest among them, his carapace scarred from wars long before Varix had been hatched, leaned forward on trembling claws. His eyes burned with something the others had forgotten how to feel. I have read their history, Koroth rasped. When humans fight, they do not stop. They do not tire. They do not forgive. You mistake patience for weakness. The council laughed louder. One mocked Koroth's age, another his paranoia. Varix said nothing. He disliked the old admiral, but dismissed his warnings too. The humans had no fleets worth mentioning, no empire, no unity. They were dust scattered across unremarkable systems. The Dominion was order. The Dominion was law. 2 weeks later, Varix's forces arrived at what scouts reported as the human homeworld itself. Earth. At last. He expected fortresses, orbital cannons, desperate fleets clawing for survival. Instead, the planet lay silent beneath the stars, its oceans gleaming like a single, enormous eye staring upward. He ordered the bombardment prepared. Down below, human cities stirred but did not run. Civilian craft moved along their flight paths as if nothing loomed in the skies above. Broadcasts flickered onto Dominion channels, unarmed men and women staring into cameras, their voices calm, measured, speaking in languages Varix's translators rendered perfectly. This is Earth. You are trespassing. Depart immediately. The Dominion fleet laughed. One captain compared it to a rodent threatening a flame. The order was given. As the first strikes fell, as human buildings crumbled in fire and dust, the same message appeared across every Dominion screen, every channel, every frequency. Project Revenant activated. All units stand by. Varix leaned forward, frowning. The words were wrong. Not the language, the implication. Activated. As if this was the plan. For the first time in his career, unease slid cold along his spine. Back in the Dominion capital, the council celebrated. Another human world burned. Another victory for the Empire of 1,000 stars. Karath tried again to speak caution into their glee, but no one listened. They mocked him until he fell silent. Meanwhile, on Earth, far below the smoke and falling ash, in chambers carved deep beneath the planet's crust, humanity did not mourn. It moved. Quietly. Precisely. Generals spoke in clipped sentences, eyes like flint. Technicians activated systems that had slept for centuries. In the frozen dark of Jupiter's moons, titanic shapes stirred beneath miles of ice, reactors throbbing awake like the heartbeat of gods. One admiral, silver-haired, eyes shadowed by long-buried wars, watched the bombardment reports with cold detachment. "They think we weren't ready," he murmured. "Good. Let's keep it that way." Across the room, someone asked if the Revenant Protocol was truly necessary. His gaze did not waver. Necessary? No. Inevitable. He turned toward the holomap looming before him, its light carving harsh lines across his face. The Dominion fleet hovered above Earth like fat carrion birds, blind to the storm coiling beneath their claws. "Open the gates," the Admiral said softly. And for the first time in centuries, Earth's hidden war machines began to rise. Far above, aboard Veilthar's Pride, Varix felt the tremor ripple through the void. A ripple he did not yet understand. He stared down at the blue planet beneath him, sensing, for the first time in his life, that he might have made a mistake he would not live to correct. The Dominion fleet never saw the trap closing. At first, it was only flickers on long-range sensors, brief, vanishing signatures in the outer system, dismissed as phantom readings or fleeing human craft. But when the first wormhole opened behind the Dominion's rear guard and a human strike group slid through like a blade through cloth, the war changed in an instant. The ships were unlike anything Varix had encountered. Matte black, angular, silent. They emitted no engine trails, no comm chatter, no signatures the Dominion's vast intelligence networks had cataloged before. They moved with uncanny precision, as if the void itself bent to guide them. The lead human vessel transmitted once, a calm voice cutting through the Dominion's encrypted channels with chilling clarity. "This sector is now under Terran interdiction. Withdraw or be removed." It wasn't a threat, not really. No raised voices, no rage or bravado. Just cold instruction, like a teacher correcting a child. Varix laughed it off at first, ordering his cruisers to swat the intruders aside. But when the human ship struck, they did so with surgical perfection. One Dominion destroyer lost engines before it even registered incoming fire. Another split apart at the seams when its reactor went critical from a single, well-placed kinetic slug. There were no wasted shots. No indiscriminate barrages. Every strike dismantled something essential: engines, weapons, command relays, leaving crews alive to watch their war machines die around them. On the Dominion bridge, panic flickered at the edges of discipline. "How are they predicting our movements?" one officer hissed, mandibles twitching. Varix said nothing. His eyes tracked the human fleet as it vanished back into wormholes before Dominion reinforcements could converge. They hadn't even taken losses. They hadn't needed to. The reports spread fast across the Dominion ranks. Colonies attacked days ago had been decoys, bait drawing them into prepared kill zones. On Earth, in shadowed command centers buried beneath mountains, human officers watched the data flow in silence. No celebration. No triumph. Just cold assessment. "Phase 2 complete," one reported. Admiral Corrin, the silver-haired man who had ordered the Revenant Protocol, nodded once. His voice, when it came, was low and even. "Proceed to Phase 3. There was no need to clarify. Everyone in that room knew what Phase 3 meant. Across the Dominion, Unease rippled through military channels. For centuries they had been predators, swift and merciless, their empire built on the bones of weaker civilizations. Now, for the first time, they felt the unease of prey. On Veilthar's Pride, Varix requested tactical analysis from Central Command. Instead, he received silence. Then fragments of reports. Dominion patrols gone dark in multiple sectors. Supply convoys erased. Communications arrays disabled with precision strikes that left surrounding civilian stations untouched. It was too clean. Too calculated. And then there was the footage. It arrived through unofficial channels, a recording from a Dominion recon team before they were annihilated. It showed human soldiers boarding a Dominion frigate. Not raging berserkers, not screaming conquerors. They moved in absolute silence, weapons steady, motions rehearsed to perfection. When a Dominion officer tried to surrender, the humans simply restrained him, secured the ship's data cores, and withdrew. The last frame before transmission cut showed a single human glancing at the camera. No words, just a look. It carried more weight than any threat Varix had ever heard spoken aloud. Later, alone in his command quarters, he made the mistake of accessing human historical archives his intelligence division had recovered. He watched wars spanning centuries, trenches drowning in mud and blood, cities turned to ash beneath nuclear fire, drones hunting men across shattered deserts, oceans filled with steel and flame, skies blackened by bombers blotting out the sun. Humanity had perfected war long before it reached the stars. They had done all of this to themselves. Varix shut the terminal off with a trembling hand. For the first time since he'd taken command, his reflection in the polished metal wall looked uncertain. On the Dominion capital world, the Council descended into chaos. Some demanded full mobilization of the Grand Armada, convinced humanity was bluffing with limited forces. Others urged retreat, citing reports of entire Dominion fleets disappearing without even confirming human losses. Admiral Koroth spoke again, voice carrying through the chamber like gravel sliding down steel. "I warned you," he said. "You thought them weak because they were silent. But humans study their enemies. They prepare. And when they strike, they do not stop until nothing stands against them." A young noble scoffed, his jeweled robes catching the light. "They are insects before the Dominion." Koroth's gaze was like a drawn blade. Insects do not build weapons that kill from beyond the horizon. Insects do not burn worlds for ideology. Insects do not turn war into mathematics. Varix said nothing. He remembered the human soldier looking into the recon camera, the cold efficiency in their strikes, the unshaken tone of that first transmission. Withdraw or be removed. For the first time, he wondered if the Dominion was facing not an enemy, but a force of nature wearing human skin. When news arrived that another Dominion sector had gone dark, its fleet silenced, its governor requesting terms of surrender from the humans rather than reinforcements, the council chamber erupted into shouts. One lord demanded the throne authorize planetary annihilation protocols. Another demanded negotiations. The emperor himself remained silent, eyes fixed on the growing list of lost fleets. Koroth turned toward Varix across the chamber floor. "You were there," the old admiral said. "You saw them. Tell this council what you felt." Varix hesitated. He wanted to speak of victory, of Dominion supremacy, of rallying their forces to crush this uprising before it spread further. Those were the words expected of him. But he remembered the human fleets emerging from wormholes like wraiths, dismantling his ships with machine precision, vanishing before he could even counterattack. He remembered the calm voices, the total absence of fear. And he remembered the look in that soldier's eyes, captured for a single frame before the feed cut out. Varix opened his mouth to speak. Before he could, a new transmission interrupted the council chamber. Live footage from the frontier. Human fleets were advancing again. Not slowly. Not probing. Entire sectors were falling in hours. And still, humanity had not declared war. They were simply moving forward. The chamber fell silent as the feed ended. For the first time in Dominion history, no one knew what to say. The Dominion Grand Armada assembled above the capital world, a sight meant to inspire awe across 1,000 systems. Rows upon rows of battleships drifted in perfect formation, their hulls glinting beneath the pale light of the system's twin suns. It was the largest concentration of Dominion power in centuries, a fleet so massive that its commanders spoke of it with the pride of priests guarding holy relics. Varric stood at the center of the flagship's command deck, eyes locked on the fleet status display. It should have filled him with confidence, this wall of firepower stretching across the void. Instead, he felt only the weight of silence pressing at the edges of his mind. Too many reports had arrived in recent days, entire sectors lost, governors begging for reinforcements, Dominion outposts cut off without a single distress call escaping before communications fell dark. The humans were advancing again.
They did not roar when they attacked.
They did not announce victories with propaganda or demand terms with blaring trumpets. They simply dismantled everything in their path, piece by piece, with the same cold efficiency as before. The Council had demanded this fleet gather as a show of strength. A decisive blow, they said, to remind the humans of their place. But as Varric watched the endless streams of tactical data scroll across his display, he wondered if they were marching toward victory or extinction. Across the void, at the very edge of Dominion space, the first human strike came. It was not the massive frontal assault the Dominion expected. Instead, autonomous drone swarms emerged from wormholes across multiple systems, each carrying enough firepower to cripple a battleship before vanishing again. They struck supply lines first, leaving the Grand Armada blind and hungry before it had even moved beyond its staging ground. Dominion captains screamed for orders, their comms crackling with panic as stations went dark. Varric barked commands to restore coordination, but every time the fleet tried to form a counterattack, the humans struck somewhere else. It felt less like war and more like dissection. Then came the second wave. Human fleets appeared without warning at the edges of the system, moving with impossible speed, tearing through defensive pickets before vanishing back into the dark. No pattern, no mercy, no wasted motion. Dominion crews began abandoning ships rather than fight battles they knew were already lost. On the capital world below, the council chambers erupted into chaos. "This is impossible," one lord shouted, his jeweled headdress trembling. "No species builds fleets this quickly. No species fights this efficiently." They were hiding it, Admiral Koroth growled from his corner, voice carrying like thunder through the chamber. "All of it. For years. Maybe longer. You thought their silence meant weakness. It meant preparation. The Emperor demanded the Armada advance, crush the human fleets in one decisive strike. Varric obeyed, though unease clawed at his thoughts. He had seen enough of humanity's precision to know this battle would not be simple. When the Armada finally moved, the void erupted in fire. For a brief moment, it looked as though Dominion power might hold. Thousands of ships advanced in formation, weapons blazing, forcing human fleets back across the system's edge. Dominion officers shouted of victories over open channels, their voices ragged with relief. Then the humans revealed what they had been holding in reserve. From wormholes across the battlespace, entire fleets emerged at once, warships larger than anything Dominion intelligence had imagined, accompanied by autonomous weapons platforms that struck with inhuman coordination. Planetary-scale EMP nets unfolded across the void, blinding Dominion sensors and scrambling targeting systems. The Armada shuddered as communications collapsed. Dominion captains fought half-blind, their formations scattering under the sudden precision of human strikes. Varric stood at the center of it all, giving orders he knew no one could hear. His flagship shuddered as its shields buckled under another silent, clinical barrage. The battle lasted hours, but it felt like minutes. One by one, Dominion ships fell silent. Entire wings vanished into fire and wreckage. Human fleets advanced with the same cold, methodical precision they had shown from the beginning. By the time the surviving Dominion vessels retreated toward the capital world, half the Grand Armada was gone. On the council floor, the nobles screamed for retaliation, for planetary annihilation, for anything that might stop the human advance. But Varix said nothing. He had seen the truth written across the void in burning wreckage. The Dominion was finished. Korath stood beside him, silent as well. The old admiral's eyes held no triumph, only grim understanding. "They don't fight like conquerors," Korath said finally, his voice low enough that only Varix heard. "They fight like people who have studied war their entire lives. Like people who hate it, but know how to end it quickly." Varix stared at the tactical map as more Dominion sectors fell dark, one after another, without warning. Entire garrisons were surrendering before human fleets even reached them. "They want this over," Varix murmured. Korath nodded slowly. "And they will make it over, whether we agree or not." When the transmission came from Earth, it was as calm as every message before it. "This is the Terran Command Authority. Dominion forces are ordered to surrender all military positions. Civilian sectors will not be harmed. Comply, and no further action will be necessary." The Council called it arrogance. A bluff. Varix heard something else in that voice. It wasn't a threat. It was inevitability. He thought of the Grand Armada's wreckage drifting through space. He thought of the human fleets emerging from wormholes with impossible precision. He thought of the calm words before every strike, like the voice of a glacier sliding down a mountain. Unstoppable, uncaring, inevitable. And for the first time in his career, Commander Varix felt fear hollow him out from the inside. The Dominion capital surrendered at dawn. No fleet guarded its skies now. No proud banners rippled along its spires. Human ships hung in low orbit, vast and silent, their matte black hulls casting long shadows across the alien metropolis.
They did not fire.
They did not broadcast threats. They simply waited. On the palace steps, Commander Varix stood among the shattered remains of a world he had once believed eternal. His armor was scorched from the last retreat, his eyes hollow from nights without sleep. Around him, Dominion soldiers stacked their weapons in surrender piles while civilians peered from shattered windows at the strangers in the sky. When the human delegation finally descended, it was without fanfare. No marching bands, no triumphal parades. Just a handful of officers in dark uniforms, flanked by silent escorts whose weapons stayed lowered. At their center walked Admiral Corrin, the man whose calm voice had ordered entire sectors to yield. Varix had expected arrogance or gloating. Instead, the human's expression held only fatigue, as if victory were a burden carried too long. "This war is over," Corrin said simply. The Dominion Council, reduced now to frightened remnants of its former grandeur, erupted in arguments behind Varix. Some demanded negotiations, others threatened defiance, but their voices carried no weight anymore. They were men drowning while the sea advanced in silence. Varix stepped forward, cutting through the noise. "You want our surrender? Fine. You have it." His voice was hoarse, cracked with smoke and sleeplessness. "But tell me this, Admiral. Why stop here? Why show mercy to a people who would not have given it to you?" Corrin regarded him for a long moment before speaking. "Because conquest was never the goal. Survival was." The words sank deep, heavier than any victory speech could have been. Varix thought of the fleet scattered like ash across the stars, the cities lost, the worlds burned. For what? Dominion pride? Dominion expansion? Against an enemy that had never sought war until it was forced upon them? The Council fell silent as surrender terms were read aloud. Dominion military command would disband. Civilian leadership would remain under provisional governance until stability returned. Human advisors, never conquerors, never overlords, at least not in name, would oversee the transition. When Varix was offered the role of liaison between Dominion worlds and the new Terran Authority, he felt the irony cut deep. A month ago, he had commanded the Dominion's most powerful fleet. Now he was a translator for the empire that had taken everything from him. He accepted without hesitation. Days passed. Human fleets withdrew from most occupied systems, leaving only small garrisons to maintain order. Trade routes reopened. Dominion civilians returned to lives forever altered, watched over by silent human ships drifting like patient sentinels among the stars. And everywhere, the same unsettling pattern repeated. The humans rebuilt what they had destroyed. Power grids, hospitals, orbital docks. They restored more than they occupied, always efficient, always precise, as though they despised the chaos of conquest even as they enacted it. Varix met Admiral Corrin again aboard a Terran command vessel, the Vigilant Dawn. From its observation deck, the galaxy sprawled in cold, brilliant silence. "You could have wiped us out," Varix said quietly. It was not accusation, not quite. Corrin stood with hands clasped behind his back, his reflection fractured against the viewport glass. Extinction solves nothing. Empires rise and fall. Species vanish. What matters is what comes after. Varix studied the human admiral's profile, the hard lines carved by war and years of command. And what comes after this? Corrin's gaze never left the stars. That depends on how the galaxy responds when it realizes the Dominion is gone and something far older just woke up. The words lingered like distant thunder. Varix had seen what Terran fleets could do. He had watched them dismantle an empire in weeks. If this was restraint, he wondered what fury would look like. Reports arrived daily now of new systems pledging allegiance to Terran authority before a single shot was fired. Former Dominion governors surrendered preemptively, unwilling to test the quiet power behind those black-holed fleets. And yet the humans demanded no tribute, claimed no thrones. They simply established order, dismantled warlord factions before they could rise, enforced treaties with machine efficiency. It was not conquest. It was control. One evening, walking through the reconstructed streets of the Dominion capital, Varix passed a group of human engineers repairing a transit line destroyed during the first assaults. They nodded politely as he approached, their expressions unreadable, their movements tireless. "Why help us?" Varix asked one of them, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. "Why rebuild what you broke?" The engineer looked at him with tired eyes. "Because someone has to." Simple words. No grandeur. No ideology. Just necessity, spoken like a law of nature. Weeks after the surrender, Corrin requested Varix join him aboard the Vigilant Dawn once more. This time the Admiral spoke little, letting the alien commander watch as Dominion trade ships moved again under Terran escort, as war-torn systems lit up with civilian traffic instead of weapons fire. "Your empire ended the moment it believed it was eternal," Corrin said at last. "Now you'll help build something that lasts longer." Varix did not argue. When the Terran fleets finally departed the Dominion capital, leaving only a skeleton presence behind, the skies felt emptier for their absence. Yet everyone knew they still watched from somewhere beyond the stars. The last time Varix saw Admiral Corrin, the human was studying a star map, entire sectors marked in silent red where Terran authority now held sway. Beyond them lay the uncharted dark, regions even the Dominion had never dared to cross. Corrin's eyes lingered there longest. "We never wanted this war," he said softly, almost to himself. "But now we're awake, and the galaxy will either stand with us or stay out of our way." Varix looked at the map, at the spreading web of Terran-controlled space, at the cold frontier beyond. For the first time in Dominion history, the edges of the galactic map no longer ended in imperial banners. They ended in silence. And beyond that silence, in whatever waited out there, humanity was already looking.